1783. The United States of America defeats the most powerful empire on Earth. Britain signs the Treaty of Paris. The colonies are free. Church bells ring from Boston to Savannah. A new nation built on liberty, on the idea that no man should kneel to a tyrant, steps onto the world's stage. Nobody tells the Americans what is waiting for them on the water. Because while the revolution was being fought with muskets and cannons, there was another force that had been watching from across the ocean. And the moment the British flag came down from American masts, the protection it carried came down with it. Within 2 years, American sailors would be chained, beaten, and paraded through foreign streets as slaves. And the nation that had just bled for its freedom would be told to its face that its people existed to be enslaved. Here is what Americans did not know. While they were colonies, the Royal Navy's treaties with the Barbary states of North Africa automatically protected American ships. For centuries, these corsair kingdoms along the coast from Morocco to Libya had raided Mediterranean shipping, seized vessels, and enslaved their crews. Every major European power paid tribute to avoid attack. The Royal Navy's arrangements covered American merchants without anyone in Philadelphia having to think about it. Independence changed everything. The British were not going to shield the people who had just fought a war to get rid of them. And the Barbary corsairs looked at this new American flag and saw exactly what it was. A rich merchant fleet with no navy, no treaties, and no protection. A nation that had sold every warship it owned to pay its war debts. July 1785, 2 years after independence, Algerian corsairs intercept 2 American ships off the coast of Portugal, the schooner Maria out of Boston and the ship Dauphin out of Philadelphia. 21 sailors seized. The crews are dragged to Algiers, stripped of their clothes, their money, their dignity. Iron rings are locked around their ankles. They are marched through the streets while crowds jeer. Then they are put to work, hauling stone, building the very fortifications that will keep them captive. One of the captured men is 18-year-old James Cathcart, a sailor on the Maria. He is assigned to the Dey's palace, where his first job is tending caged lions and tigers. He is beaten with rods in a punishment called bastinado, the soles of his feet struck until the flesh splits and his toenails come off. He will remain a slave for 11 years. He will not see his country again until he is 29. Captain Richard O'Brien of the Dauphin writes to Thomas Jefferson from captivity, "Our sufferings are beyond our expression or your conception." He is not exaggerating. Back in America, the reaction is bewilderment as much as outrage. The United States has no history with North Africa, no quarrel, no grievance. Americans cannot understand why a country they have never wronged is kidnapping their citizens and demanding payment for their return. Thomas Jefferson, ambassador to France, and John Adams, ambassador to Britain, decide to find out. In March of 1786, they travel to London and sit down with Tripoli's ambassador to Britain, a man named Sidi Haji Abdul Rahman Adja. Jefferson and Adams ask the question plainly. By what right does your government attack our ships? Why do you enslave our people? America has done you no injury. We have never had a quarrel with any Muslim nation. We consider all mankind our friends who have done us no wrong. The ambassador's answer lands like a hammer. As Jefferson and Adams report to Congress in their letter of March 28, 1786, the ambassador tells them it is founded on the laws of their prophet, that it is written in the Quran that all nations who have not acknowledged their authority are sinners, that it is their right and duty to make war upon them wherever they can be found, and to make slaves of all they can take as prisoners, and that every Muslim slain in battle is sure to go to paradise. Jefferson and Adams are sitting in a London drawing room being told by a foreign diplomat that American citizens deserve to be enslaved because of who they are. Not because of anything America has done, not because of a border dispute or a trade war, because the United States has not submitted. That is the offense, existing without permission. The man who wrote "All men are created equal" has just been told that his countrymen are property. Jefferson wants war immediately. He writes that paying tribute will only invite more demands, that the Barbary states will bleed America dry if given the chance. He pushes Congress to build a navy and fight back. John Adams disagrees. War will cost more than tribute. The country is too broke, too exhausted from the revolution. Congress sides with Adams. The treasury is empty. The Continental Navy has been disbanded and sold off. The country that defeated Britain cannot project force beyond its own coastline. So the United States of America, the nation that bled at Bunker Hill and froze at Valley Forge and broke the greatest military power in the world, begins writing checks to the men who are enslaving its citizens. The payments are staggering. In 1795, the United States hands Algiers nearly $1 million in ransom and tribute, 1/5 of the entire federal budget. 1 out of every $5 the American government collects goes to a North African warlord so that American ships can sail without being seized. Treaties follow with Tunis and Tripoli. Each demands more. The payments keep rising, the treaties keep breaking. By 1800, the country is spending up to 20% of its budget on tribute, and still losing ships, still losing men. September 1800. Captain William Bainbridge sails the American frigate George Washington into the port of Algiers carrying tribute. He is 26 years old and commands a warship of the United States Navy. The Dey of Algiers looks at this American ship sitting under his harbor guns and decides he owns it. He orders Bainbridge to carry Algerian tribute to the Sultan in Constantinople under the Algerian flag. 200 passengers, livestock, and $600,000 in gifts crammed onto a warship built for 130 men. Bainbridge refuses. The Dey tells him, "You pay me tribute. By that you become my slaves. I have a right to order my slaves as I please." Bainbridge looks at the batteries aimed at his hull and folds. An American warship strikes its colors, raises a foreign flag, and sails 1,600 miles to Constantinople as an errand boy. The guards there have never heard of a country called the United States. Bainbridge has to explain it is part of the New World discovered by Columbus before they let him dock. When the news reaches home, Bainbridge writes to the Secretary of the Navy, "I hope I shall never again be sent to Algiers with tribute, unless I am authorized to deliver it from the mouth of our cannon." In 1801, Thomas Jefferson becomes president. 15 years since that London drawing room. 15 years of paying. He is done. On May 14th, the Pasha of Tripoli demands $225,000 or war. When Jefferson refuses, the Pasha orders the flagstaff in front of the American consulate chopped down. A declaration of war. The first, the United States will fight on foreign soil. Jefferson sends the Navy. The frigates Congress authorized in 1794 because of the Barbary threat are built and ready. The blockade of Tripoli begins. The first 2 years are a mess. But in 1803, Commodore Edward Preble takes command, and the war changes. And then it almost ends in disaster. October 31st, 1803. Bainbridge is blockading Tripoli in the 44-gun frigate USS Philadelphia when he chases a Tripolitan ship into shallow water. The Philadelphia hits an uncharted reef and sticks fast. The crew throws cannons overboard, cuts the foremast. Nothing works. Tripolitan gunboats swarm in. At 4 in the afternoon, Bainbridge surrenders. 307 Americans are dragged ashore and thrown into prison. The same man who was called a slave in Algiers is now a prisoner in Tripoli. 2 days later, a storm lifts the Philadelphia off the reef. The Tripolitans tow her into the harbor and begin refitting her. If they succeed, she becomes the most powerful warship in North Africa. Built by Americans, armed by Americans, now aimed at Americans. Preble writes that the affair distresses him beyond description. Lieutenant Stephen Decatur is 25 years old. Preble gives him the mission: not capture, not recovery, destruction. Sail into an enemy harbor, board an American frigate, and set her on fire. Burn one of the finest ships your own country has ever built so that the men who chained your countrymen cannot turn her guns on you. On February 3rd, 1804, Decatur sails from Syracuse with 60 men on a captured Tripolitan ketch renamed Intrepid. 9 Marines, swords, and boarding pikes. No firearms unless absolutely necessary. They spend 13 days crossing the water. 13 days knowing that if anything goes wrong inside that harbor, there is no rescue coming. Just after dark on February 16th, the Intrepid drifts into Tripoli harbor. The water is flat. The city is quiet. A Sicilian pilot calls out to the guards in the local language, claiming the ketch lost her anchors. The guards let them tie alongside the Philadelphia. For a moment, the only sound is rope creaking against timber. Then Decatur gives the order. 60 men pour onto the deck. Within 10 minutes, 20 Tripolitans are dead, one is captured, and the rest have gone overboard. Decatur's men set fires in the gunroom, the cockpit, the storerooms. The ship catches fast. Flames climb the rigging. The loaded cannons begin cooking off, blasting randomly into the harbor. The Americans escape on the Intrepid without a single casualty. Behind them, the Philadelphia explodes as her powder magazine ignites. The harbor lights up like daylight across the city. When British Admiral Horatio Nelson, the greatest naval commander alive, hears what Decatur has done, he calls it the most bold and daring act of the age. The Philadelphia is gone. America would rather burn its own ship than let it be turned against them. But 307 Americans are still in that prison. Preble bombards Tripoli 5 times over the summer. The city takes damage but does not break. And then an American consul named William Eaton proposes something insane. March an army overland across 500 miles of North African desert from Egypt to the port city of Derna, capture it, and continue to Tripoli to overthrow the Pasha entirely. His army consists of 8 United States Marines under Lieutenant Presley O'Bannon and 400 Arab and Greek mercenaries recruited in Egypt. 8 Marines, 400 mercenaries of uncertain loyalty, 500 miles of open desert, a single cannon, and almost no food. Nobody in Washington expects them to make it. On March 8th, 1805, they start walking. Supplies run out within days. Their only rations are a handful of rice and 2 biscuits a day. The mercenaries mutiny repeatedly. Camel drivers refuse to continue. The Christian Greeks and the Muslim Arab mercenaries are at each other's throats. Somewhere in the middle of the Libyan desert, the column starts to tear itself apart. Then the Arab mercenaries make a desperate rush at the supply wagon, the last food the expedition has. 8 Marines and a handful of Greek artillerymen wheel the column's single cannon around and aim it at their own allies. The Arabs fall back. The column holds. That is the image. 8 Marines in the open desert, pointing a cannon not at the enemy but at the men marching beside them, because if that wagon falls, everyone dies. They do this, and then they keep walking. They cross into Libya, still marching, still starving. 50 days across open desert. On April 27th, they reach Derna. 3 American warships, the Nautilus, the Hornet, and the Argus, are waiting offshore. The ships open fire on Derna's defenses. Eaton sends the governor a message offering terms. The governor's reply is 4 words: my head or yours. Under the bombardment, Eaton leads his battered force in a direct assault. Marines from one direction, Arab cavalry from another. The garrison brace. Lieutenant O'Bannon storms the harbor fortress and plants the American flag on the walls. It is the first time the Stars and Stripes has ever been raised in victory on foreign soil. The first time, but not the last. Eaton begins preparing to march on Tripoli itself. He intends to end this war with boots on the ground in the enemy's capital. But before he can move, American diplomat Tobias Lear signs a peace treaty with the Pasha on June 10th, 1805. The terms: $60,000 in ransom for the prisoners, no future tribute, no annual payments, no more being called slaves, a fraction of what the United States had been paying every year. The era of American tribute is finished. Almost. By 1807, the Algerians are at it again. It takes a second war in 1815 to end it permanently. Stephen Decatur, now a commodore, sails back to the Mediterranean, captures Algerian warships, and dictates terms at the point of a cannon. No more tribute, no more ransom. The European powers follow within months. The Barbary tribute system that terrorized the Mediterranean for centuries collapses. The frigates built because of the Barbary threat became the foundation of American sea power. The USS Constitution, commissioned to fight corsairs, would defeat British warships in the War of 1812. She still floats in Boston Harbor today. The Marines who marched to Derna gave the Corps its most famous words: "To the shores of Tripoli." Still the opening line of the Marine hymn: "The Mameluke sword every Marine officer carries is modeled on the blade given to O'Bannon after the battle, over 200 years and counting." In 1786, 2 men sat in a London drawing room and asked a foreign ambassador why Americans were being enslaved. The answer they received is the reason the United States Navy exists, the reason the Marine Corps exists. They were told their people were born to be slaves. They built a navy to prove otherwise.